Do you ever feel overwhelmed in your business and like everything is on your shoulders and it's just a heavy load to bear? In today's video, I wanted to share with you some cutting edge inner game work that you can do that can completely change this storyline. And it happens to go along with a big announcement of a change that's happening in my business after 14 years. And then I want to finish up with a lesson of how you can create more ease and flow in your business and take that burden off your shoulders so we can continue this conversation on how to do business differently in a more soul-aligned way. Let's start with a big announcement. After 14 years of focusing on working with women in my business, it now feels like it's time to open the doors to the men and to all genders, to be completely gender inclusive. I've shared with you that I am doing business differently and I'm very surrendered to the divine, often listening to what wants to happen. And I could feel that it was time to complete with working only with women and to begin to welcome in the men and to welcome in all the genders to be gender inclusive. This feels big. I'm excited and humbled and stand before you sending out the call that it feels like we need to come together in community. The work that wants to happen now needs all hands on deck, and I'm excited to see what can happen from here because I feel like there's going to be even more magic there. And it also feels like it creates more consummation, if you will. Now, that's a word that has really kind of stood out to me in the last year. Something magical about that word. Consummation. When I get excited about a word, I look up the etymology. The etymology of consummation is to bring to completion, to bring to fulfillment. Yes, that's what I want to do in my work, is to consummate, to bring to fulfillment. Back in my hippie healer days, I studied energy work. So humor me, I want to geek out for a little bit to explain what I learned then and how it relates to now. And it's going to set us up beautifully for our lesson to help you understand how to do business differently and not feel like everything's on your shoulders. So I studied a modality called Polarity therapy, and it was all about helping a person open up to all of their life force energy so they had access to all of their power. And we did this by putting our attention on opposite ends of a spectrum, their positive pole and their negative pole. And when we did that, it opened up the power between. I can give you an example of a battery. So if you think of a battery, there's a positive pole at one end and a negative pole at the other end. And what creates the energy and the power of the battery is the arc of electricity between the two opposite ends of the spectrum. And so it goes with all of the universe. This is what I call the engine of the universe. We've got contraction and expansion. We've got protons, we've got electrons, we've got left brain and right brain, solar and lunar. This is how the universe works, having two opposite ends of a spectrum that create power between them. This is what happens too between the masculine and feminine archetypes. Now, when I use masculine and feminine, I'm not referring to gender. This isn't about men and women. This is about the archetypal energies of the masculine and the feminine. Every human has an inner feminine and has an inner masculine, just like they all have a left brain and a right brain. If we only focused on one aspect of ourselves, we only focused on our feminine energy or only our right brain, then we would be missing out on the full end of the spectrum that creates that arc of electricity between. To me, this sort of explains why I might be feeling called to open up the doors and welcome in all genders, because I feel like we need all the opposite ends of the spectrum so that we have maximum power to do the work that we're here to do. My lesson for today is how you can work with your inner feminine and your inner masculine to bring them into consummation and how this can help you in your business. I want to make sure we have a baseline around masculine and feminine archetypal energies. One of my favorite analogies is to think of a vase with flowers. The masculine is the vase, it's the container, it's the utilitarianness. And then the flowers are the feminine. They bring beauty and radiance to the world. I also love the analogy of a river with riverbanks. The feminine is the river, the wild, chaotic force of nature, ever changing. And the masculine are the riverbanks that come in to create containment and direct that force. The masculine is very much about action and direction and making things happen and bringing things to form. The feminine is very much about being and radiance and nurturing and being connected to nature. You can see how we need these two energies and how they work together, and you can see that they're also polar ends of the spectrum. We've got doing on one end in the masculine and being on the other end in the feminine. We need both of them, and when we put our attention on both, it creates an arc of electricity and power between them. Now, how do we bring these together to help us in business? I remember when I was first teaching Pleasure CEO back in 2015, and I was like, I've never heard anyone explain this. Went into meditation and I was like, okay, how do they actually work together? Because business is pretty inherently masculine, right? Like you're using your left brain, it's logical, linear, you're coming up with strategies and directions and you have goals and there's competitiveness. Like it's inherently masculine. And there's a way to bring the feminine into business, but it's also like, it's very different. So how do they actually work together? So this is what came through when I finally understood it. What I saw was that everything starts in the feminine. Everything starts in that place of beingness. Everything starts in the great mystery, in the cosmic void. This is very much the yin aspect of Chinese cosmology, the formless. It's the primordial substance of the universe from which all things come. It is chaos before it becomes shaped into form. This is the feminine. Ideally, we sit in the feminine. We sit in the nothingness. We sit in the great void and we wait. And we gestate. And what happens is at some point, there's a spark, a seed of sorts, where we feel a spark of desire from our feminine. And from there, ideally, we're in our feminine and we feed that spark of desire with our turn on and we gestate that seed in our bodies and we're nurturing it and allowing that seed to grow. So this, ideally, is where we start in our business. In the feminine. But then what happens is once the feminine is kind of boiling and enjoying being in that gestation, what happens is that turn on and that desire awakens the masculine. And the masculine is like, my woman wants something. I want to help her make it so. The masculine is dying to be of service. The masculine wants the feminine to have everything that she desires. The masculine wants to bring form to the formless. It wants to help give shape to these desires. And so the masculine shows up to come up with a strategy to make it so. This is how you create the consummation and how they work together. What does it look like in business, you ask? Here are 4 examples. And before I give them to you, I want you to remember these examples are for everyone. Man, woman, non-binary. We all have a masculine inside us and a feminine inside us. And here's how they can work together in business. Number 1, first of all, make time to be in your feminine. Put it into your calendar, carve out the space. Give yourself time for gestation. Give yourself time to sit in the cosmic void. Give yourself time to listen, to be. Give yourself time to do nothing, like no doing, only being. You can start with a timer for 5 minutes if it's something that's a little challenging for you, but work up to an hour. Really sit and be. And tune into your senses and really be in the feminine. Number 2, take time for your desires. Really begin to listen to these sparks of desires. Your desires are holy. They come from the divine. They are sparks of life force that come through you for a reason. But often we don't give ourselves time or space to allow them to come through, or we squash them before they even come alive because we think we're never going to get them, then what's the point? But ideally, you give yourself time to listen for those sparks of desire. And when you do, you feed them and you feel into your turn on around them and you imagine receiving them and you feed them with your goodness and your life force and your juice. That's going to kind of create some life force around your desires. Number 3, Now we bring in the masculine. If you do 1 and 2, what's going to happen is the masculine is going to naturally arise. You're not going to have to push or hustle or grind or think something up or like make something happen. There's going to be a natural impulse of like, oh, there's this desire. Oh, I bet I could do X, Y, and Z to make it come true. And so you'll see that when you till the soil of the feminine, what happens is that the masculine and the yang energy will naturally rise up. And all of a sudden, there's a plan and there's a strategy. And then you can put it into action. Number 4, the masculine loves appreciation. It feeds him profoundly. When you feel your masculine coming up with a plan and a strategy, take some time to appreciate him. You could do it through journaling, you could do it through contemplation, you could do it through speaking to yourself in the mirror and imagine you're speaking to your masculine. Pour some appreciation on your masculine and you'll see that he'll puff up and become more willing to take even more action. So let's come full circle. I started out asking you if you felt like sometimes you're doing everything all by yourself and it's all on your shoulders. What I want you to see is if you think of, we come back to our battery. If a battery only had one end, like if it only had the positive pole but not the negative pole, then there is no power. But the way that the power comes in is when we have the opposite ends of the spectrum. So it goes with perhaps doing work only with women. I do think there's going to be an extra juice and extra magic when we open it up to be co-ed and gender inclusive, because we're going to have that arc of polarity between opposite ends of the spectrum. So it goes in business. If it feels like you're doing it all alone, then perhaps you might be. You might be identifying with only one aspect inside you, maybe only your masculine, or maybe only your inner feminine, in which case it's going to feel like you're doing it all alone. However, if you can learn how to work with both of them, opposite ends of the spectrum, in partnership, in consummation, creating that arc of polarity between them, then you're going to find a way to create more ease and flow in your business. So you know I'm in the process of birthing this new program on death power, and I'm calling to all entrepreneurs to come together in community to go through a death process so that we can be leaders on the forefront and know how to work with this powerful energy of little d deaths. I promise that I will be using my own inner feminine and my own inner masculine in inner marriage in order to bring this program to you. I'm super excited to see what it's going to be like to hold the space for a co-ed and gender inclusive experience as we do this deep work together in community. So stay tuned to hear more.